Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Our next Innovation Thought Leadership discussion focuses on how technology, data analysis, and digital networks are transforming procurement and the source-to-pay process as we know it. We'll examine recent findings of benchmarking information conducted by SAP Ariba that uncovered 7 essential traits of modern procurement that are driving innovation and business transformation. And then we'll discuss what it takes to do procurement well in this new era of business networks. Far beyond just automating tasks and transactions, procurement today is a strategic function that demands an integrated, end-to-end approach built on deep insights and intelligence to drive informed source-to-pay decisions and actions that enable businesses to adopt a true business ecosystem-wide digital strategy. To talk more about survey results that show proven ways of doing business better in our digital and connected world, please join me in welcoming our guest. We're here with Kay-Ree Lee, Director of Value Realization at SAP. Welcome, Kay-Ree.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you. Really, the Value Realization group within Ariba is a fairly new group that helps our customers gain traction in the adoption of their software by providing support either through content or hands-on practical support. So thanks, Dana.
Right, glad you could join us. So, Kay-Ree, procurement, it seems more complex than ever. Supply chains now stretch around the globe. Regulation is on the rise. Risk is heightened on many fronts in terms of supply chain integrity. Innovative companies, however, have figured out how to overcome these challenges. And so you at the Value Realization Group have uncovered some of these secrets, some of these best practices through your annual benchmarking survey. Tell us a little bit about this survey and what you found.
Well, the program that we have it's an annual program. It's a benchmarking program that covers purchasing operations, payables, sourcing, contract management, and working capital. And what's really unique about it, Dana, is that it combines a traditional survey, which asks basic questions, with data from our procurement applications and business network. And I'll share a few stats about this program. This past year, we analyzed, we looked at more than 200 customers who participated, covering more than $350 billion in spend. So what we then did was we analyzed their quantitative and qualitative responses from the survey and identified really the sweet spot or the intersection between those responses for top performers compared to average performers. And then we drew correlations between what top performers did well and the practices that drove those achievements.
Right, so this sounds like by making that intersection, it's sort of an example of the power of business networks because you're able to gather intelligence from your business network environment or ecosystem and then apply a survey back into that. It seems to me there's sort of a whole greater than the sum of the parts between what something like the Ariba network can do and what market intelligence is demanding.
That's right. Right. Really, the data from the applications and the Ariba network contains a universe of insights and intelligence and transaction data that we've amassed over the last 20-plus years. And so, by looking at the data, really what we've found is that there are specific patterns and trends that can help a lot of companies improve their procurement performance either by processing transactions with fewer errors, processing it faster. They can source more effectively by collaborating with more suppliers, having suppliers bid on more events, and working collaboratively with suppliers.
Mm-hmm. And of these 200 companies, and I think you mentioned something like $350 billion of spend, do we have any sense of what kind of companies these are, or do they cross a mix, a variety of different types of companies in different places doing different vertical industry activities?
They're actually cross-industry, so we have a lot of companies in the services industry and in the manufacturing type industry as well. So they really cross different industries and offerings that they do.
Great. So this sounds like a really unique, powerful data set across many industries, so fairly indicative of what's going on, not just specifically in one or two places, but across industries. So that's great. Before we dig into the details, let's look at the big picture, sort of the 100,000-foot view. What would you say are some of the major high-level takeaways that defines best-in-class procurement and organizations that can produce it these days based on your data?
There are four primary key takeaways that define, what best-in-class procurement organizations do. And the first one that we saw was that, a lot of these best-in-class organizations, when they look at source-to-pay or procure-to-pay, they manage it as an end-to-end process, right? So they don't just look at a set of discrete tasks. So they look at a big and broad picture. They do this by managing source-to-pay with one end-to-end process accountability. So more often than not, what they do is they have an assigned process expert, or they have a process owner that's really accountable for the entire end-to-end process. That's the key takeaway number one. Key takeaway number two is that a lot of these best-in-class organizations also have an integrated platform from which they manage all of their spend. So it is this platform that provides them the flexibility to their internal customers or to their stakeholders based on what their customers and stakeholders are trying to purchase. For example, maybe a company needs to keep track of items that are critical to manufacturing, and they need to have inventory visibility and tracking, right? So that's one requirement. Another requirement is maybe they have to purchase manufacturing or machine parts that are not stocked, that can be purchased through supplier catalogs with pre-negotiated part description and item pricing, right? So the ability to offer, through an integrated platform, these different permutations of way a person or a company or internal customer can buy is what's another takeaway from our survey.
Yeah, could I pause you there for a second? Are you saying that the same platform can be used in these companies across all the different types of procurement and source-to-pay activities? That would be, say, internal services, even indirect, perhaps across different parts of a large company. There could be manufacturing, there could be transportation. Is the common platform common for all types of purchasing?
That's right. So one common platform for different permutations of what you're trying to buy is important, and is a key takeaway from our survey this past year.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The third key takeaway was that best-in-class organizations, they leverage technology to fuel greater collaboration. They don't just automate tasks. And one example of this is, by providing self-service options, perhaps. A lot of companies think, self-service options is dangerous, perhaps, because, you are leaving the person who is requesting items to be able to select on their own, and they may make mistakes, right? But, the way to think about self-service option is, it's providing an alternative or the ability for our stakeholders to buy and to have a guided buying experience that's available 24/7 around the clock, right? So you don't need somebody there supervising them. They can go on there on the platform, and they can pick the items because they know the items best, and they can do this around the clock. And so that's another way of offering the flexibility and fueling greater collaboration.
Yeah, so we have technologies these days like mobile that allows more of that democratization of involvement. That sounds like a real powerful approach.
That's right. Yeah, we believe the same thing. And then the fourth key takeaway is really best-in-class organizations. They connect to networks, right? Networks have become very prevalent these days, but they connect to networks to assess intelligence, not just transact, right? So they don't just get on a network to transact. They go out in the network, they collaborate with others, they get intelligence from the network. And, a network really offers the scale that organizations would otherwise have to develop multiple point-to-point connections, perhaps for transacting with thousands of different suppliers, right? So you think about a network, right? You go on a network, you have access to thousands of suppliers. If you didn't have a network, what you would otherwise have to do years ago was maybe develop point-to-point connectivity, which, costs money and takes a long time, and, you have to test out those connections, etc.
Yeah. Now, I'm old enough to remember from IT, Metcalfe's Law, which roughly says that the more participants in a network, the more valuable that network becomes. And I think that's probably the case here. So is there any indication from your data and research that the size and breadth and depth of the network is as important as we've seen in pure IT terms?
Absolutely. I think those three words are key, right? The size, right? You want a lot of suppliers transacting on there, which you do. And then the breadth, right? You want, your network to contain global suppliers, so some suppliers that can transact in remote parts of the world, Nigeria, Angola, right, where a lot of oil companies are, and then the depth of the network, right, so the types of suppliers that actually transact on there. You want to have suppliers on there that can transact across a plethora of different spend categories, right, suppliers that offer services, suppliers that offer parts, suppliers that offer more mundane items even, right, but you hit the nail on the head with the size, the breadth, and the plethora of the network.
Yeah. So for industry analysts like myself, these seem pretty straightforward. I see where procurement and business networks are going, and I can certainly agree that these are major and important points. But I'm wondering, because we're in such a dynamic world and because companies, at least in many of their procurement organizations, are still catching up in technology terms in some ways, how are these findings different than, say, if you had done the survey 4 or 5 years ago? What's been a big shift in terms of how this journey is progressing for these large and important companies?
I don't think that there's a big shift, right? I think that over the last 2 to 5 years, perhaps priorities have changed, and so there are some patterns that we see in the data for sure, right? For example, the pattern in data is sourcing, right? Sourcing, and while sourcing savings continue to go up, go down, sourcing is still important to a lot of organizations to prove out cost savings, right? Companies need to be agile, right? So the data tells us organizations need to be agile, and they need to continue to do more with less, right? So what we see in the data that we share as part of one of the key takeaways from this is cost structures of procurement organizations have come down. What that means is they have fewer people operating certain processes, and that means that it costs organizations less to operate those processes because now they're leveraging technology even more, right? And then they're able to also deliver higher savings because they're including more suppliers. They're including different suppliers as they go out to market for certain spend categories, for example. So that's what we're seeing different. So not really shift, but there are some patterns in the data. Organizations continue to do more with less. They go out and are still able to achieve a lot of savings from sourcing.
Right. It seems to me, too, though, that because we're adding, through that technology, more data and insight, that we can elevate procurement more prominently into the category of spend management. So that allows companies to really make decisions at a large environment level across entire industries, maybe across the entire company, based on these insights, based on best practices, and they can save a lot more money. But then it seems to me that elevates procurement to a strategic level, not just a way to save money or to reduce costs, but to actually enable processes and agility, as you pointed out, that haven't been done before. Is there any, before we go to the traits themselves, is there any sense that your findings illustrate this movement of procurement to a more strategic role?
Absolutely, and that's one of the key traits that we found from this study is that the top one on the list is that top performing organizations really they view procurement as not as a back office function, right? Procurement is front and center. They play a strategic role within the organization, and they manage spend, right? And they, when you talk about managing spend, you could talk about it at the surface level, or we have a lot of organizations with managed spend to the depth that at the category management, supplier relationship management, supplier risk management level, right? And that's what we see in some of the different traits that distinguish top performers from this study.
Yeah. Well, as we know, Ree, many people trust most their cohorts, their people in other companies that are doing the same function they are for business acumen, for information about how to proceed in best practices. So this information is great because we're learning from the people that are doing it in the field, doing it well. What are some of the other traits that you uncovered in your research?
Okay. Yeah, so let me go back to the first trait real quick. The first one that we saw that drove top-performing organizations was top performers really, they play a strategic role within the organization, right? And they manage more spend, and they manage that spend at a pretty deep level, right? And so one of the stats that I'll share is that top performers, they see a 36% higher spend under management compared to average organization. So what that means is average organization an average organization manages less spend. Top performers manage about 40% higher spend, and they manage at a higher level of depth, right? And there's a few different ways they actually do this, right? I want to share how they actually do this as well. They do this by playing a strategic role in the organization, right? They're not a paper pusher, right? They have a strategic role in the organization. They have a seat at the leadership table, right? So they're part of the business in making decisions. They're part of the planning and budgeting and financial planning process, right? And where procurement is really engaged in the businesses, etc. And they also ensure that they're working collaboratively with their stakeholders to ensure that procurement is viewed as a trusted business advisor to the business, not an administrator or a gatekeeper to the business. Right. So that's really the first trait that we saw that distinguishes top performers. The second one is that top performers have an integrated platform. So we talked a little bit about that earlier. So they have an integrated platform for all procurement spend, and they conduct regular stakeholder spend reviews, resulting in higher sourcing savings. And so how we came about that is through our data. We saw that sourcing savings continues to be a focus for a lot of sourcing organizations. And what top performers really do better in this area than average performers are, they actually conduct regular spend reviews with internal stakeholders. So they'll conduct regular cadences, quarterly meetings with the businesses to review their spend. And these reviews serve different purposes, right? They provide a forum for discussing sourcing opportunities. So imagine, you going out to the business unit and you talk to them about, okay, here's your spend for the previous year, right? Here's who you've spent money with. What is your plan for the upcoming year? What spend categories can we help you source, right? What's your priority for the upcoming year? Are there any capital projects can you help out with? So really understanding from the business and from your stakeholders additional sourcing opportunities, really collaborating with your businesses, and then making sure that procurement is being responsive and agile to the stakeholder requirements, because you can, as procurement folks, you can't really expect your stakeholders to come to you with, a list of requirements. You have to be proactive about it, and we have to actually go out there and make sure that, we're being responsive and we're being agile to their requirements. So that's really the second finding that we saw from the survey. Mm-hmm. The third one is that top performers, they manage procure to pay as an end-to-end process with a single point of accountability, and this really drives a higher PO, purchase order, and invoicing efficiency. And this one is actually quite straightforward. Where we see top performers, they have a single point of contact, right? So a single process owner who's accountable for the entire source to settle process, and having that person, our data and the intersection of data and best practices really tells us that drives a higher transaction efficiency rate.
Yeah, I can speak to that personally. In too many instances, I work with companies where one hand doesn't know what the other is doing, and there's finger pointing, and any kind of exception management becomes bogged down because there isn't that point of accountability. I think that's super important. Yeah,
that's right. And we see that as well. And so the fourth one is that, top performers, after they source, and so, when you go out to the market, you source spend categories, all you get is negotiated savings, right? So the question then becomes, how do you operationalize those negotiated savings so that it becomes actual savings, right? And so the way top performers approach it is that they manage compliance, and they manage compliance to those source categories by creating fit-for-purpose strategies for purchase, right? So they drive more spend towards contracts and towards electronic catalogs for a guided buying experience, right? So, somebody has gone out and sourced. They've done a tremendous job in getting negotiated pricing. So now, what we want to do is make sure that that negotiated pricing trickles down to actual savings. And you do that by, having a bunch of contracts and catalogs that are available to your stakeholders that would guide them to, the negotiated pricing, so that they're not having to enter pricing, which would then dilute your savings. They're not having to enter item description, etc. Right? So directing them to channels that that have the pre-populated information is key to managing compliance.
Right. Okay.
And then the fifth trait that we saw was, top performers, they look at working capital and they look at it closely with the ability to analyze historical payment trends and then optimize payment instruments resulting in higher discounts, right? So more often than not, I've been out in purchasing for a while and work with a bunch of different customers where we see, sometimes within procurement, working capital is not important to procurement because it's left to the accounts payable function, right? But top performers, or top performing procurement organizations, they look at it holistically. They look at working capital. It's another lever that they manage within the sourcing and P2P process, right? So it's another negotiation point where they go out and they can actually affect whatever working capital from a payment perspective so that they can standardize payment terms, they can take discounts when they need to, and then they can look at historical data and really, have a strategy for, and variations of the strategy, right, for, how are we going to pay strategic suppliers? What's the payment term for standard suppliers? When do we pay on terms versus, discounts? And then when do we pay on a P card, right? So they look at working capital, they look at it, holistically as part of the entire procurement process.
Yeah, that really shows where being agile and intelligent can have major benefits in terms of your ability to time and enforce delivery of goods and services and also get the best price in the market. That's cool.
Absolutely, yeah. And, having all of that information, right, and having the ability to transact efficiently is key to that because, let's say you have all of the information, but you cannot transact, efficiently, you're slow to make invoice payment, etc. Then while you have a strategy and approach, you can't even make a change there, right? So it's important to be able to do both so that you have the options and the flexibility to able to, to manage to that strategy, to operationalize that strategy.
Mm-hmm. All right,
the sixth trait that we saw was that top performers really they leverage technology and they provide self-service to enable 24/7 or around-the-clock business, and this really helps organizations drive down cycle time for PO processing. So within the oil and gas sector, for example, it's critical for organizations to get their items out to the field because if they don't, then that may jeopardize operations on a big scale, right? So PO processing time is important to manufacturing industries, to oil and gas industries, etc. And having the ability, offering the ability to perform self-service and to enable that 24/7 really gives organizations the flexibility and gives users offers users the ability to maneuver themselves around the system quite easily, and then generally systems nowadays are quite user-friendly as well. So let the users do their work, trust them in doing their work so that they can purchase the items that they need to when they want to.
Yeah, Kerry, this really points up the importance of the user experience and not just your end user customers, but your internal users, and how younger folks, millennials in particular, are actually quite happy and almost expect that self-service capability.
That's right. And so purchasing shouldn't be any different, right? We should follow the lead of other industries and other mobile apps and, allow users to, self-service, right? If you want to buy something, you go out there, you pick the price. The pricing is out there. It's negotiated pricing. So you pick the item and then let's go,
Right. It's enabling a lot of productivity. That's great. Okay,
that's right. And the last one is, top performers, they leverage technology to automate PO and invoice processing to increase administrative efficiency. So what we see is best-in-class organizations, they leverage technology with various features and functionality within the technology itself, right, to increase administrative efficiency. And then a couple of examples of this may be, the ability to collaborate with suppliers on the requisitioning process, right? So perhaps, you're doing a 3 bids and a buy, and during that process, it's not picking up the phone anymore. You list out your requirements for what you're trying to buy, and you send it out automatically to 3 suppliers, and then they provide responses back. You pick your responses, and then it converts to a PO, right? So that flexibility by leveraging technology is key. Is another trait that top performing organizations are doing.
Yeah, and of course, we're expecting to get even more technology involved with business processes. We hear things about the Internet of Things, more data, more measurement, more scientific data analysis being applied to what may have been more gut instinct types of business decision-making, now more empirical. So I think we should expect to see even more technology being brought to bear on many of these processes in the next several years. So that's kind of important to see elevated to a top trait. All right. What I really like about this, Kyrie, is this information is not just from an academic or maybe a theory or a prediction, but this is what organizations are actually doing. Do we have any way then of demonstrating what you get in return if these are best practices as the marketplace defines them? What is the marketplace then seeing when they adopt these principles? What do they get for this innovation? How brass tacks, money, productivity, and benefits, what are the paybacks?
Yeah, so I'll share a few different stats with you, right? So the different paybacks are, I'll share stats for top performers. Top performers, they're able to achieve about 7.8% in savings per year as a percent of source spend, right? So that's a key monetary benefit that most organizations, sourcing organizations, they look to, right? So what sourcing savings can I get, right? It's 7.8% in savings, right? Another one is, top performers.
Wait, just to pause you. 7.8%, somebody who's not familiar with what we're talking about might not seem large, but this is a huge amount of money for many companies, right?
That's right. That's right. Per billion of dollars, that's, maybe $78 million.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They also manage more than 80% of their spend, and they manage this spend to a greater depth, right? So if you want to manage spend, having the right tools to do it, processing transactions efficiently, managing contracts, managing compliance, that's the way, you want to be able to manage your spend to a greater depth. And by having all of that data, you can then run spend analysis, etc. Right? So that's a key business benefit for organizations that are, looking to transact over the network, looking to leverage more technology. And then I'll share a couple more. Top performers, they transact and they collaborate electronically with suppliers to achieve a 99% plus electronic PO rate. So what that means is, most organizations or best-in-class organizations, they don't even, attach a PDF to an email anymore, right? They create a requisition, it gets approved, it becomes a PO, and it's automatically sent to a supplier, right? Nobody's involved in it. The system sends it, it sends over the network, suppliers get it, and then they fulfill your order. So, the entire process becomes, touchless essentially.
Yeah, so these traits promote that automation that then leads to better data, which allows for better process. It really is a virtuous cycle that you can get into when you do this.
That's right. Yeah. So, kind of like one leads to another, a lot of these are.
Yeah. All right. Any other ways that we're seeing paybacks?
Yeah, let me share with you maybe a couple of different examples as well, right? So, that's paybacks, but, proof is in the pudding. I'll share a couple of examples from my experience looking at some of this data for specific companies. So one organization, utilized the availability of collaboration and sourcing tools to really source transportation lanes to obtain better negotiated rates and drive higher sourcing savings, right? So, a lot of organizations use, collaboration and sourcing tools, but the reason why this stood out is because when you think about transportation, there are different ways to source transportation lanes, right? But having done it through an e-sourcing tool and having the ability to generate a high percent in savings through collaboration and sourcing tools, that was an eye-opener for me, right? So that's an example of, an organization really using technology to its benefit of going out and sourcing a not so common spend category. And another example I'll share is, I have a customer that was really struggling to get control of their operational costs related to transaction processing while trying to manage and drive a high degree of compliance, right? So you can do one or the other, you can't do both. So what they were struggling with is, their cost structure was high, but they wanted to keep the cost structure lower, but still drive a high degree of compliance, right? So when we looked at their benchmark data really helped open the eyes of the customer to understand how to drive improvements by directing transactions to catalogs and contracts where applicable. They were driving suppliers to create invoice-based contracts on the Ariba network, and then they were enabling more suppliers to invoice electronically. Inherently, this then helped reduce invoice errors, which was resulting in a lot of rework for the AP team as well. So these two benefits, in addition to examples, in addition to the quantitative benefits, hopefully share the tremendous opportunity there are for organizations out there to adopt some of these and leverage some of these technology.
Right. All right. So given that we are seeing more technology become available, more data and analytics become available, that the business networks are being built out in terms of size, breadth, and depth, and we've identified that the paybacks can lead to a virtuous cycle of improvement. Where do you see things going now that you've had a chance to really dig into this data and see these best practices in actual daily occurrence? Mm-hmm. What do you see happening in the future? How can we extrapolate from what we've learned in the market to what we should expect to see in the market?
I think, so Dana, I think, really right now with all of these insights and best practices and the intersection of data and best practices we see on the network and all of this data stuff that we have on the network, we are still only just scratching the surface with insights, right? So while we have a lot of data, generating insight, takes a bit of time. So, and we are only just scratching the surface. But, I'm hopeful because we have a roadmap of advanced insights that we are planning for that our customers we have the privilege of leveraging to help them increase efficiency of operations and effectiveness of sourcing. An example maybe what I'm thinking about is maybe the creation of pricing comparisons mechanisms, right? So we see all of these transactions on there, but perhaps there's a way for comparing pricing so that customers can then look to see, what's prevailing price, what they're paying, and then, from there go about and make their decision for how they want to buy, when they want to buy. But overall, I think, we are still scratching the surface, but we have a roadmap in place, and, you all would just have to stay tuned for more.
Yeah, I know it sounds very exciting, and I think we can also perhaps consider bringing artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities into this as we use cloud computing, and the information and insights are then shared through a sophisticated infrastructure and services delivery approach. Who knows where we might start seeing the ability to analyze these processes and add all sorts of new value-added benefits and transactional efficiencies. So, yeah, really exciting the next several years. Okay, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored Briefings Direct discussion focusing on how technology, data analytics, and digital business networks are transforming procurement and source-to-pay processes as we know them. And we've heard how new survey results from SAP show 7 essential traits of excellence for modern procurement and digital business innovation. We've also seen from this data and learned how these best practices have been proven in the field, and they can deliver some significant benefits and further elevate procurement to a strategic role within organizations. So please join me in thanking our guest and thanking him for sharing this great information and insight. We've been here with Kay Lee, Director of Value Realization at SAP. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dana.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining this SAP Ariba sponsored business innovation thought leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.